Trustees. It is Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. Tonight, no board action will be taken. This is informational only. We are hoping to get a lot of questions answered tonight. So that being said, let's go ahead and pledge to the allegiance. Anyone that could stand, please do. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. Roll call. Please let the record show that all the board members are present. We're going to move on to the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're going to move on to the Community Informational Forum, Project Flex. And this is where I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight. Tonight's forum will be moderated by Jay Johnson, an experienced facilitator with a background in public relations, crisis communication, and behavioral science. Jay has moderated high-stakes conversations across healthcare, public safety, education, and manufacturing, including forums on political races, corporate transitions, and community challenges. He has worked with both local and international audiences, often stepping in during moments of tension to help guide productive, respectful dialogue. With roots in southeastern Michigan and a history of community engagement, Jay brings a deep understanding of how to navigate difficult conversations with empathy, clarity, and focus. Please help me welcome tonight's monitor, Jay Johnson. Jay.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? How's the sound? Is that good? We want to make sure that everybody's able to hear all the way through. I think that we're good. Excellent. Thank you. It is an honor to be here. I'm going to start off tonight by thanking everyone because this matters and it's important. And that's why you're all here. I want to acknowledge something that's true inside of this room. This is a highly sensitive issue, and everyone here shares strong feelings, real concerns, and important questions. And that's valid. And it's important, the fact that you are here in this room tonight. I appreciate that as a citizen, as somebody who also pledged that allegiance to the flag and this democracy. So tonight, it's about not dismissing anybody's emotions, their feelings. In fact, it's about embracing curiosity. I know you have a lot of questions. I ask that we all be open to new information, including everybody on this panel and this board up here. So these questions, which we will get to in just a little bit of time, but as we navigate some of this, my job is going to be to ensure clarity and consideration for the hot topics related to the implementation of this project. Tonight is about creating understanding and sharing accurate information in a way that allows as many voices as possible to be heard. We are all adults here. I trust we can approach this with dignity and respect. In saying this, I would like to share a few ground rules that I use in every facilitation, whether it's corporate, whether it's community, or anything else. And I want to be very clear about this. First, this forum will be conducted with dignity and respect. That means we speak to each other as neighbors and as human beings. We are all human inside of this room, even when we disagree. We want to remain positive role models for others in the community. We want to make sure that we're not misrepresenting ourselves and losing our own dignity in the process of finding truth. This is your community. Second, we will have a zero tolerance for disruptive or aggressive behavior. Yelling, screaming, threats, intimidation, or personal attacks will not be tolerated. If this happens, we will ask that you be escorted out. There will not be a warning. Again, we are all adults here. This is a conversation that's going to be difficult, and I fully understand that. That's what my role and my job is. We will get to great answers and questions, and those questions will be submitted by you. So I will be looking to that, and I will share that in just a moment. Okay? The other thing is be respectful to your neighbors that are sitting around you. I see a lot of signs, those are awesome, and I see you all being very respectful with them right now. Try not to hold them up. We don't want to block anybody else's view. I want to make sure that everyone here has the right to be able to see the stage and to be able to engage and understand what's happening. I would also ask that if we do the disruptions, that's going to create the conditions that we will not have enough time to get through some of these really important questions. So thank you in advance. Third, this is a democracy and you have a right to be heard. Because time is limited, I am going to tell you this. I have reviewed every single question on the website, every question submitted in forums. I have prepared myself for this, as well as been watching the Slido, and there is also an email address for you to communicate your needs. While I will do everything in my power to get as many answers to the questions that you have this evening, it is going to be impossible to do that, and I have a bedtime. Thank you for laughing. I appreciate that very much. I wasn't sure how that was going to land. I'm not going to lie. I was taking a step there. All right. But with that being said, your voice matters, and I will be sure to protect it. You can submit questions through that Slido, through that dedicated email address. We will not get to every question, but the township has agreed that they will get answers to every single question submitted, and that will be available to you publicly on the website. So please understand, we'll do our best with the time that we have together here this evening. My role, again, is to facilitate a process that's fair, objective, structured, and respectful, so that we all leave tonight with more clarity than we came in with. I'm honored, truly, to help guide this. It's a difficult conversation. It's kind of my specialty. I'm asking everyone to commit to these standards so we can make this time count. Thank you. It's truly an honor for me to be here, and I think that we should get started. With that, I would like to invite Varys to give a presentation that they have put together to answer quite a few of the questions, and I have had the opportunity to look. A lot of the questions are answered within the presentation. We are keeping this until 8:15 p.m., and then we will continue on with questions and answers that are related to the Slido questions that you have put in and the questions that we have fielded within the organization, on the boards, and through the forums. Thank you very much. Jeff?
Excuse me. Thank you, Jay. And I just want to say thank you to the township, to the trustees for convening this session. Before I go through the prepared materials, I do just want to share a few personal thoughts. So first, thank you, everybody, for taking time away tonight.
Jeff, I'm so sorry. Can we move the microphone a little bit closer so it's not quite picking up?
This is the mic right here.
Oh, you got it. All right.
Yeah.
Let's just make sure. Can you hear him in the back?
No, you can't hear me?
Yep. So let me, if I can, do you mind?
Yep.
You're welcome. I couldn't tell that it wasn't necessarily coming through as well as we need. And all right, should be good. Give it a test.
All right, we'll give it a try. I'm hopeful.
Better?
Can everybody hear me now?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jay, and again, thank you to the trustees, to the township, and thank you everybody here for showing up tonight. I know you've taken time away from family, other priorities to be here, and we just really appreciate your openness to hearing more about Varys, about our people that are committed to doing something really different and better. And we want to share as much as we can about this project and get to every question we possibly can and share as many answers as we can. I grew up outside Lansing. Most of my life I've lived in the Midwest. My parents are Wayne State grads. I've spent more Thanksgivings than I can count with my aunts and uncles, cousins in Southfield. It is part of who we are to care deeply about our community, and so I get that. And I want you to know that our team has been listening closely to all of the questions, and I'm here to make sure that we provide straight answers. So we know and are not really going to try to change folks' minds tonight, but we do want to be clear that we're here to share what we're actually building and our real experience about what building a better data center can look like. And if you take anything away from tonight, I hope that it's clear that Varys and our people are really committed to building something cleaner, quieter, safer, and better for the electric grid. That everyone who is part of Varys has seen firsthand what the old way looks like, and we know there's a better way. And that's what we want to share with you tonight, is more details about what that looks like. So if we can move on to the presentation. So all of these slides have a whole ton of information on them, and the reason for that is we want to be sharing as much information as we can. I am not going to try and read every slide. These will be posted on the Township website, I believe. We will certainly make sure they're available from the project website that went live today, but I am going to try and hit the highlights. And then, as Jay said, we're going to try and get to as many questions as we can tonight and provide those straight answers. So I'll start with just an overview of what's different about Project Flex. And just at a very high level, we are building a true next generation data center that's designed to be, as I said earlier, safer, cleaner, quieter, better for the electric grid. It starts with the most modern cooling system that's available, that we've designed our data center to consume 99% less water than traditional data centers. And I'll give you some more details about what that looks like and how to compare that to other things that you might be more familiar with, but just a dramatic paradigm shift in the reduction of the amount of water consumed compared to any other data center. We've also designed the most modern backup technology using batteries. We do not rely on diesel generators as the backup. We use those batteries because they're quieter, they're cleaner, and they're safer. They are better in so many other ways that I won't go into, and certainly feel free to look at the details once we post the materials, but it makes a big difference. We're also building a data center that I said earlier is designed to help the power grid, right, to keep the lights on. I've spent most of my career working for nonprofit grid operators. I live today on the north side of Indianapolis because I worked for many years at the nonprofit grid operator that helps coordinate reliability for Michigan, among other places. And we are designing a data center that is specifically built from the ground up to be part of helping maintain reliability, that we become a resource to the utility when the grid is stressed so that they can rely on our data center to flex our demand to help balance the grid, to make it more reliable. And by doing that, by not stressing the grid when it's adding stress to the grid, it also helps keep rates in check because we're still paying the full electric bill that everybody pays. We're paying the normal electric bill that any large customer would pay. And all of those dollars are going to the operation and maintenance of the existing grid. So by being a large new customer, we're able to help pay for those things. And so that helps the utility cover the costs of the existing grid. And that means less pressure on rates in the future. And I certainly don't want to speak for DTE, but that's certainly our expectation. And one of our goals is to help keep rates in check. Then, of course, we want to bring economic development to the township. We'll talk more about what that looks like, but we really do believe in being a community member that adds to the community with economic development, with jobs, with new tax revenue. All right, so as I said in my opening, we have been listening to all of the questions and concerns, and we just wrote a few down on here so that you could at least hear some of them that we've been capturing. And as I said earlier, we want to capture everything we can. But we've heard people ask, what is this thing going to look like? Is it going to be an eyesore? We've had people ask, what do you mean it's more sustainable? What does that actually look like in practice? What are you doing differently? We have had people question whether it really is safer and quieter, and we want to talk about the details of what it means to be safer and quieter and how we do it. And then we'll talk more about the community benefits as well. I think it's important to start with the history of our partner in this project, Wallbridge, because they've been a community member for a very long time, and in many respects, it's one of the things that made us excited about being part of this project, bringing this new and better kind of data center here. Is Wallbridge has been a long-standing member of the community, has contributed for more than 40 years to helping grow this community. The site has been something Wallbridge has owned since the mid-'80s. and I'll get into the details later, but it's been planned for industrial development since well before that, since the 1950s. I believe Chrysler actually owned the site at once upon a time, was talking about building an automobile plant. So it's important to us that we are part of, partnering with local community members, with, folks that have been part of helping the community grow over many years, and certainly Walbridge has been that great partner so far. So I think there's been a lot of questions about the site's zoning, and what really is the background. As I said a minute ago, this location has been zoned for industrial use since the 1950s. It was owned by Chrysler at one point, and there's been various different ideas about how to develop it, but it's always been an industrial planned area of the community for longer than many of us were around, certainly longer than I've been around. That's something that we're interested in. As I said earlier, we're trying to be building a better data center that fits in with the community, and we want to go places that are already planned for this kind of development. We're not trying to go to agricultural land and turn it into industrial. We're not trying to go into a place where the community hasn't already identified it for industrial or this kind of data center development. It's important that we weren't going to seek variances for this. We didn't seek variances, none were granted. This was considered a planned use for this site. I'll note that we're trying to go above and beyond in the way we're designing this. So for instance, the setback for the design of the data center is further from the property lines than is required under the zoning. The height of the data center is far less than is allowed for under the zoning. And there's other things, we'll talk about things like how the noise levels will be far lower than are allowed for and so on. And again, we've done everything we can to work to follow the processes that are laid out in the township rules and regulations to make sure that we are delivering exactly what is required to cite a project like this one. And everything has always been publicly filed, and it's still available on the township website. So I think there's been questions about how the site plan approval process went and how it was followed and how we've met all the requirements. So we started down this road working with the Detroit Regional Partnership, who's here, that helped point us to this site and to the potential partnership with Walbridge, and to work with the township here on the consideration for developing this site. As I said earlier, we followed all the standard site plan review processes. We have submitted documents always in our own name. We have operated completely in the open following the public meeting process, where all of the submittals, public posting of materials, staying fully compliant with the zoning as it is, not asking for any changes or any variances. And I really want to be clear about this last point, because I know it's been a question some have asked. We've never asked any township official or anybody involved in the site plan approval or the zoning to sign an NDA. We're proud of what we're building. We're not ashamed of it. We don't think anybody should have to hide the fact that they're talking to us or what we're saying to them or what they're saying to us. So it's been incredibly important for us to be operating in our own name without any hiding of who's involved. It's also important to know that this effort to upgrade all of these infrastructure things really didn't start with the plans for our project. It actually predates us. As I said earlier, Walbridge has been a member of this community and investing in the community and the infrastructure for many, many years, whether it was investing in a wastewater treatment plant, I think decades ago, bringing in the engineering expertise for the design of a ring road and the Hudson drain, improving drainage. I mean, there's lots of investments that have gone on that predate the development of this project, and that really speaks to Walbridge's commitment to the community for decades. And we are proud to be partnering with them on this project because of that. So we've also heard questions about what this development will look like. So we wanted to include some drawings that are as close as a drawing can be to what we're actually planning to build. And you can see that we're trying to design something that we're going to be proud of, that hopefully the community would be proud of if they were looking at this at the buildings. And I'm going to show you in a minute how they're relatively obscured from the streetscape. But if you were inside the property and looking at these buildings once they're built, I think you would find them to be relatively appealing. And again, designing them to be nice looking, commercial style, office building style buildings that are not an eyesore. So again, all of this is on our website. These slides will be posted. You can get a closer look. We've heard folks question, like, will I be able to see this from the street? Is it going to be an eyesore? We've got pictures here that hopefully you can see. I know it's a small picture, probably from as far back as the back of the room, but we are building berms and foliage along the property line that will mostly obscure the buildings from the street. So if you're driving up Milford Road, you probably won't be able to see it, or maybe you won't see it very well. And our goal is to make sure that folks don't feel like there is some massive development sitting right off the road there. And as I said earlier, we're also doing setting the buildings back further from the property line than is even required under the zoning. So we've also heard questions about, is it going to blend in with the surrounding area? Are we building to sustainability or green building standards? And as I've said a few times, we are doing everything in our power to design something that meets all of those expectations. Larger setbacks, higher berms, lower building heights. We're going to be building to green building design, using green building design methods that are certifiable under green building standards. So we're working on all of those things. And as I said, there's lots of details on this slide. I won't try to read all of them to you, but I hope you'll take a look after the meeting to get as deep into the details as you feel like you want to. But our goal is to build something that we're proud of, because we know what the old way looks like, and we really do know what it also looks like to do something better. I think one of the biggest questions, or maybe most common questions we've been hearing about is as it relates to water. And I certainly understand the concern based on the history of data centers, that older data centers can use a lot of water. But we are using the most modern technology, closed loop cooling system that don't require remotely as much water. As I said earlier, it's a paradigm shift. And just to give you a sense of scale, the Veris data center would use about 9 million gallons a year. That's across 6 buildings, so about 1.5 million per building, give or take. But to put that into context, your average golf course uses about 3 times as much water. And that's in this area of the country. A typical vehicle assembly or parts plant is going to use almost double that amount of water. And going to the next slide, by comparison to a traditional or legacy data center, it's almost impossible to even see how much less our data center is using by comparison on this slide, because it's so small, right? The 99% less water because of the modern closed loop cooling system that we're going to be using. Dramatic reduction, far, far less than anything that maybe you've been reading about. And that is part of what's in our mission as a company, is to build this better kind of data center that uses modern, well understood technology to lower the impact, to make the positives as positive as they can be.
Please, if we could, this is the presentation time. We will have questions, and I do have questions that are already queued up in Slido to address this and to dig deeper. So I would just ask that we allow the presentation to continue, so that way we can get as much information out, and then we will move forward. Thank you, though.
So I think the question that we've been hearing a lot of, both online and in some of the submitted questions, is, well, how is that possible? How can you be using so much less water? And is this like a known technology, or are you like starting from scratch? Is this something you've created that's brand new and never been tested? And the answer is, it's safe, it's effective, it's in use at some data centers already. It's in use in other facilities besides data centers. Closed loop cooling is the modern, most efficient way to cool facilities that produce heat. And we're adopting it at a scale alongside other efficient technologies that will make this possible. And so we're glad to be able to use a very well-known, established technology to reduce our water consumption. I encourage folks to take a look at the details that are on this slide. There's a whole bunch of details on this slide that explains how closed loop cooling works. But it really is a closed loop. And it's very efficient, extraordinarily efficient, and it's why it's part of our new holistic ground-up design to build a much better, more efficient, more sustainable data center. And again, I'll just reiterate, everybody on this team has worked at other companies that build data centers, and we're all part of Verus because we know it can be better. We want to be part of building something better, and we are looking forward to being part of this community and building this better data center. So I think there is, the obvious question is, okay, you're using a lot less water, but where are you using the water that what's happening with that water you are using? And the answer is, we are using the most of those 9 million gallons per year, about 1.5 million per year per building, as a occasional, maybe a few days of the year, up to a dozen or so days of the year, we would have misters. And it's a bit like if you were on the beach and you saw a mister misting water to help you cool off. We would do the same thing with our cooling systems, with our HVAC systems. And this pure water mist is what is happening to the water that we're consuming. And that, as I said, is only done maybe a few dozen days of the year. It doesn't require very much water in the grand scheme of things, but the benefit is a dramatic reduction in electricity use. And that's why we do it, because it's a way more efficient way to cool than using so much more electricity. And as I said earlier, our goal was to design the most efficient, the most energy efficient, the most sustainable data center that we could design, and that means bringing all of the best technologies together in what we're building. And this misting technology is part of that. It helps us reduce meaningfully the amount of electricity that would otherwise have to be consumed on a super hot day. I think there have been questions in various different forms about the batteries. So we've talked about how we're adopting batteries in lieu of diesel generation for the primary backup. As I said, there's a pretty strong consensus, and I'll share some more information about that in a few slides, but pretty strong consensus that batteries are cleaner and safer. But what makes them cleaner and safer? Well, first, the batteries are the same kind of batteries that have become very, very well established in all of our lives these days. And they're the fastest growing resource that's being built on our power grid, so tons and tons of experience building these batteries. So we can build what's known, what's understood, using all of the best certified technologies to manage any safety risk. And I'm going to keep moving as I think I'm being told I'm running a little bit low on time. So what have we done to be sure the site is safe and that we're prepared? We've worked with the township, whether it's the coordination with the civil engineers or the Lyon Township Fire Department, to review all these plans, and we want to be sure that we've addressed all of the concerns, and all of our systems are designed to using the most modern monitoring technologies, the most modern enclosures to be absolutely as safe as they possibly can. And again, batteries by themselves are far safer than the alternatives. I mean, frankly, batteries are safer than the gas furnace in most people's homes. So we feel strongly that this is a very safe way of going about it, much safer than the alternatives.
I would ask for decorum, allow this to finish. We will ask our questions. Thank you.
I think there's questions about, as a big electricity customer, what are we going to do to the reliability and affordability of the grid? And again, I'll go back to, we are designing this data center from the ground up to be something that can help with reliability. We are going to be a flexible resource that's at the disposal of the utility and the power grid operator to ramp our electricity use down whenever the grid is stressed. That is the most effective way to help maintain reliability. It is more effective than having to count on starting up a generator when the grid is stressed. It's much faster, much more reliable to have customers that are willing to reduce demand. And because we have batteries that can allow us to shift over to those batteries during those times of stress, we can be that reliability tool. And as I said earlier, that also means we can help keep rates in check, because we're paying our electricity bill but not causing the grid to need new big upgrades. And that allows the money that we're paying to be used to help maintain the existing grid. I think there have been questions about what are we going to do, or how are we protecting customers from having to pay for just our connection to the grid. And I will tell you that the energy substation that's going to be built, we're going to be responsible for constructing it, for paying for it directly ourselves. We are not asking the utility to build or pay for this substation, so there's no cost being paid by ratepayers or by the utility for this substation. And we're going to connect to the grid as it is. We don't need massive upgrades. Because we're a flexible load, we don't need massive upgrades to the grid. I think there's questions about why are we focused on demand flexibility? Why is this a big deal? There's a pretty strong consensus out there that demand flexibility is the best thing we can do to make the grid more reliable, more affordable, more sustainable. There's just a few snippets of independent entities that are saying exactly what I'm saying tonight. Where there's the Natural Resources Defense Council, there's an article published in Planet Detroit, there's a report put out by the Michigan Environmental Council. All of the links to those reports on the web are in this slide deck. I'd ask you to take a look at them, but they're saying the same thing that I'm saying tonight. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to spend time on this slide, but we try to explain a little bit more about what this demand flexibility or demand response actually means, and I'd ask you to take a look at it if you're interested. But it is a phenomenal tool for the utilities to help maintain reliability. The next maybe other big question out there is how quiet will it be? And again, I've said we've chosen technologies intentionally to be much quieter, whether it's the batteries instead of diesel generators, whether it's the most modern HVAC systems that are far quieter because of the way they're designed and the way they're installed. All of it is designed to reduce the noise that you might otherwise hear about from a traditional data center. And the sound studies that have to be independently verified by the township show that the expectation is we will be far less noise than is allowed under the zoning, and really about the same level of sound that if you were standing right on the property line, about the same level of sound you would get from a brand new modern dishwasher in your kitchen if you were standing next to that. And again, 44 decibels is the independent study.
Please, again, I'm going to ask, please be respectful. This isn't a question and answer time. I will get to the question and answers. I understand your question, sir, but I'm going to ask that for the respect of everybody else that's sitting here, we wait until the proper time, and we'll conduct that for sure. Okay?
So,
I understand.
who else is saying that
Let's
batteries are
finish this.
safe and needed to support grid reliability? American Clean Power, which represents the solar and the wind industry and geothermal development industry, they're also saying that batteries are a phenomenally clean and important way to support development of our grid, a way to make our grid cleaner. This is a fact sheet that American Clean Power has put out, a few snippets from it that talk about how large batteries are very safe and help clean the grid.
I've got that on my question and answer. So please, again, I am listening to you. I am here for you. I'm recognizing the questions, the areas that we will dig in on. They're very consistent. I assure you, these are going to be hammered on in the question and answer section. So please, I understand, but this is ideally to set up some of the information. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to please, I'm going to ask you to please refrain, allow this to continue, and then we will continue forward with question and answer. Thank you. Please continue.
And I thank everybody for their attention. We're really trying to share all the information that we can offer to answer the questions. As I said, not trying to change people's minds, trying to give straight answers to the questions that we've heard. The last question, the big question we've heard is, what are the benefits? As I said earlier, sizable tax contributions to the community, lots of construction jobs, up to a couple thousand local construction jobs, good union construction jobs, over 200 long-term jobs once the campus is fully built out, jobs ranging from traditional IT roles to operations, maintenance, security, all kinds of things that you would need to run a large commercial building. We also will be investing in infrastructure, whether it's roadway improvements or the drain. So that is the last slide, Jay, and I just thank you for your attention and consideration. That's all we can ask for.
Thank you, Jeff. We will follow up with a number of those things in the question and answer section. I would like to let DTE know that you are on deck. At this point in time, we are at 7:52. We will conclude all of this at 8:15 and go directly into Q&A. So please be considerate of that, and please proceed.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear? Is my mic
Dan,
on?
pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you.
Sure.
Yep, I got you.
Is that
That's much better. Yes,
in the back?
thank you.
Are we good? In the back, I see some thumbs. Great. Thank you very much for the acknowledgement. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Mahoney. I'm here on behalf of my company, DT Energy, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to each of you about our role when it comes to data center service here in the state of Michigan, and specifically southeastern Michigan, where we serve electricity to our customers. Look, we play a unique role here, right? DT Energy, as a regulated utility here in the state of Michigan, has an obligation to serve each and every customer that comes to our state and wants to connect to our system. And because of that obligation, we are laser focused when it comes to data centers on making sure that our existing customers benefit from data centers and are protected from some of the things that have happened in other states around the country. I know Jeff talked to many of them before. I'm going to speak specifically tonight about electric service, and we're going to stick around and answer as many questions as we need to, right? Let me first begin with, I was using my device there. Great, okay. Let me first begin by talking about a basket of protections that exist here in the state of Michigan for our customers, right, as data centers become part of our system. I'm going to go from left to right here and talk about each and every one of them. No, this is the one I'm speaking to. I'm going to talk about each one of these left to right, and then I'm going to unpack them a little bit more in the balance of my presentation. So starting on the right-hand side of the screen here, in 2024, the state of Michigan, the state legislature passed what's called a sales and use tax exemption, which is what's attracting data centers to the state of Michigan, right? This is a policy that was passed with broad bipartisan support. Both Democrats and Republicans voted for it, but they did so applying a lot of lessons that were learned from other states around the country. And they included in this legislation specific provisions around electric service that eliminate the risk of having our existing customers subsidize data centers. You heard Jeff speak to this before when he covered one of his slides. Under no circumstances are we allowed to provide service or a rate to a data center that doesn't have them covering 100% of their costs to connect to the system and consume power from our generation fleet, right? So that is first and foremost one of the primary protections that the state of Michigan has baked into its policy to attract data centers. The second two are really rooted in the regulations that govern our business. Cost of service rate making is a policy the state of Michigan has had for a number of years now, and it's pretty simple. We can only charge you what it costs us to provide service to you. So whether you're a commercial customer, a residential customer, or an industrial customer, the rate that you pay is basically designed around the cost it takes to serve you electricity. All right? That is what creates fairness and equity in electricity rates and makes sure that each and every customer contributes equally and fairly to our system. Right? Maybe I don't need to say more, but it is a great way of preserving equity and fairness in utility rate making. The last one I want to highlight is resource planning, how we think about our generation fleet and how we have regulations in place that prohibit us from extending our generation fleet beyond its capacity to serve any new customer, right? So while we have an obligation to serve any new customer that comes to the state of Michigan, we have to demonstrate both annually and on a longer-term basis to the Michigan Public Service Commission that we have the generation in our fleet to provide power reliably to all of our customers. We do this both annually through what's called an annual capacity demonstration, and we do this every 3 to 5 years through what's called an integrated resource plan, which is a sophisticated document that we file with the Public Service Commission and go through a contested process to showcase what we think our customers will need from our generation fleet over the next 5 years. And we also paint a more long-term vision for the generation fleet over the next 15 to 20 years to make sure we're forecasting out potential shifts in load from our customers. So these three things together really create this basket of protections for our customers. However, there's a fourth one that is emerging, and I want to add that to this, this piece of the conversation as well. Recently, the Michigan Public Service Commission ordered DTE to design a specific rate for data centers. It would still be rooted in cost of service methodology. It would still look a lot like the industrial rate we charge many of our industrial customers here today, but it is going to bake in specific provisions, again, to add extra layers of protections for our existing customers. Thank you. I just want to articulate a few of them so you hear it directly from me, right? Financial protections. DTE must bear the financial risk if projected savings do not materialize. Ratepayer safeguards. A 19-year contract term with 80% minimum billing ensures the data center pays for capacity regardless of usage. Termination fees, a penalty covering up to 10 years of charges applied if the facility closes earlier. Grid reliability, the data center's load must be curtailed before residential or small commercial customers during shortages. Reliability compliance, cost tracking mechanisms will also be put in place. So these are expectations the Public Service Commission has put on us as a utility provider when we enter in agreements with projects like this one here tonight. There are a handful of other slides, but possibly maybe in the interest of time to make sure we cover all the questions. They will be available on the Township's website, and I encourage you to go look at them. DT has also just tonight launched a new component of our website, dtenergy.com Data Center Facts. Some of you may have the one-pager that was at the front table. I apologize if we did not print enough for everybody, but that same information is on this new website, and we encourage you to go look at it. And as Jeff sort of earlier highlighted, like get the facts, right? And make sure that as you voice your opinion to your local officials, you're doing so with all the facts at your fingertips. So thank you very much.
One more time and I will ask you to leave. I am asking you to respect your audience members here. We will get to Q&A. We will get to Q&A. I understand, but you're speaking on behalf of everybody here. We've got a Slido. We've got the information coming. So I will ask to please refrain until we get to question and answers, and refrain then, too. Please, if we could, from the regional partnership.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me? Am I coming through? All right, perfect. Evening, everyone. My name is Will Butler. I am with the Detroit Regional Partnership. We are the regional economic development agency serving Southeast Michigan. First of all, I just want to reiterate some of the comments made here. Thank you to all of you for being here tonight and taking time out of your evening to be here and express your feedback. Thank you to the Township for the opportunity to present our viewpoint tonight and talk a little about why we are generally supportive of Project Flex and this proposed development. My goal here tonight is really kind of twofold. One is to share a little bit about why the Detroit Regional Partnership is supportive of data center uses across Michigan, and then set Project Flex in a little bit of context in comparison to other uses that had been previously considering the South Hill Business Park. So, as a nonprofit economic development agency, our goal, our mandate, our mission is obviously to recruit new jobs and new investment to Metro Detroit. But we don't do that blindly. We do try to do that while marrying corporate investment projects with community priorities. And from our perspective, data centers really are a key and essential piece of infrastructure for our digital economy, but also our everyday life. They support far more than just AI, whether that is your emails or a health system accessing online medical records or streaming your favorite TV show or movie on Netflix. Data centers are behind the scenes, but they're the key piece of infrastructure that allow you to do that. And for communities, data centers also provide stable and long-term tax revenue that fund services, libraries, and schools, and that's vitally important. That revenue is really important for communities. And I don't want to get into the weeds here. I'm not an accountant, but under Michigan's current tax structure, manufacturers frequently do not pay local personal property taxes. They pay a different tax called the State Essential Services Assessment, but data centers do pay that local personal property tax. So comparatively, there is actually more tax revenue out of a data center use. And unlike some industrial, in some industrial uses, these data centers generate that revenue without emissions, with much lower traffic, and with generally less intensity that you might find from some manufacturing uses that get proposed. And according to the best data that we currently have available, a 2025 George Mason University study, data centers don't have an adverse or negative effect on property and housing values. Fair enough. I do also want to note that Wallbridge...
Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back.
I do also want to note that Wallbridge, I think there's a point of confidence here. Wallbridge is a nationally renowned data center constructor across the country. So as we talk about confidence in the reliability and the quality of this development, I think there's a lot of confidence there. Go to the next slide here. So I also do want to touch a little bit on the history of the site. Jeff mentioned this as well. The site has been zoned as industrial since the 1950s. And so while an industrial use is not only permitted, right, and allowed, it's something that probably should be expected. And over the past 6 to 7 years, the Detroit Regional Partnership has been in existence about 6 to 7 years. We've had a handful of companies that have seriously considered this location and this site. And they've tended to be proposing more intensive or heavy industrial uses than what this Project Flex is currently proposing. I should note that these projects, and we'll go to a table in the next slide where we actually directly compare some of these projects to Project Flex. These projects have either canceled their projects or located outside of the state of Michigan, but they are the most useful data point that we have to show what other opportunities and projects could have potentially located if it wasn't Project Flex. And against those projects, which again, I'll go to the table in just a minute here, Project Flex requires less water, less wastewater capacity, has dramatically less truck traffic, dramatically less vehicle traffic, and generally represents from our standpoint and what we see a better community-aligned operation. And again, Jeff mentioned this, but part of, I think, the attractiveness of this opportunity was the fact that Project Flex and this team was brought together from other related firms and from experts in the data center space really to build that next generation of data centers. And they do this with the goal of reducing utility demand and with building something that's less impactful than older generation data centers or more traditional data centers that you might see out in the market. And then lastly, this is the table that I was referencing. This slide gives a side-by-side comparison of Project Flex alongside a handful of other projects that we had been working with over the past few years that were looking at this site. And while I won't go through this line by line, I do just want to call your attention to obviously water, sewer, and truck traffic, where Project Flex is significantly less than some of those other uses that had been looking at this site previously. And so again, I believe this will be uploaded where people can view it, but wanted to present that right here. And with that, I will pass it back to the moderator, but I just want to say thank you guys again for your time here and being here, providing your feedback. It really is valuable to this process moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I do have a question related to this. Over the past, how many years did you say that those different projects had come in?
Yeah, it's about 6 or 7 years.
Okay, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know that this is a very sensitive issue, and I do appreciate the decorum. We will get into the question and answer. I'm taking these questions directly from you, the audience. We will go in order, so that way we can have structured communication. With permission, I would like to start with you, Brian, Township Planner. There is a number of questions that are related to zoning. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not a zoning expert. I wasn't even sure what zoning really meant until I started researching this, but I do know that it's related to the different sites. Can you explain what the zoning of projects, what is the current zoning of Project Flex?
So the zoning of the property is I-1 and I-2. It's split zone. There's 2 zoning designations. Those are both industrial zoning designations. They've been that way for quite some time. Somebody mentioned 1957. There was a manufacturing district on the property that has since transitioned to a general industrial zoning.
Brian, it seems to me 1957 is a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I don't know what data centers looked like at that point in time. That law in 1957 was sufficient, or they met the standards of that 1957 zoning requirement? Like, help me understand this industrial 1, industrial 2, because that doesn't really make sense to me.
Sure. So looking back at records, 1992 was when data centers were added to the list of permitted land uses within those I-1 and I-2 zoning districts. So in addition to data centers, there's a whole host of things that can go on that property. There are assembly uses, production uses, manufacturing, warehousing.
Not to interrupt, but those are the types of things that we just heard from the regional partner that had put to that position previously? Is that accurate?
The township has had introductory meetings through the Detroit Regional Partnership. They have brought some of those uses to us. Okay. And we've gone through the challenges and standards that are not met with some of those that were on the screen there.
Thank you for that. One of the questions that has come through on Slido, and it was also on the township, is this parcel was questioned to be zoned agricultural. Is there some kind of explanation of why there would be a misinterpretation of agricultural versus I-1 and I-2?
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you, Jay. I believe that question likely came from the master plan. So the master plan has a few different charts that analyze land use, maps that analyze land use. Within that plan is an existing land use map, which is basically an inventory of what's out there. And if you walk out there today, you're going to walk through a field, an agricultural field. So that's where that came from. It is quite regular that the way that properties are being used today doesn't reflect the permittable uses on that property. So in this case, it's farmed, it's agricultural, but when the owner proposes a permitted use or a special land use on the property, we are required to consider that per the ordinance.
Okay, so let's get into this special land use, because that's specifically brought up in the questions coming from the audience. Many people had mentioned special land use is required for buildings over 100,000 square feet. Why didn't this project require it?
Yeah, so there's a distinction within the ordinance about industrial uses, and the ordinance calls them quasi-industrial uses, which are things that are adjacent to
Like Quasimodo industrial uses or what?
Something like that. Industrial uses by definition in the ordinance are things that are assembling or manufacturing, tool and die shops, machine assembly shops, trying to think what else is in there. All sorts of manufacturing of goods and raw materials are all industrial operations that standard would apply to. But things like a data center, things like a dry cleaning operation, things like a nursery that are permitted uses in the industrial districts do not qualify for that standard. So we went through the through the site plan review process as a permitted use for this project.
Okay. One of the questions that was brought up is why or when was this project first brought to the township's attention?
We had our first pre-application meeting with the applicants in June of 2025.
June of 2025. And my question, the follow-up question, which is very clear across the board, why wasn't the public notified of this project?
Thank you.
I told you I got you. All right. Thank you. Please, could you answer this?
Yes, thank you, Jay. Any permitted uses, actually, let me step back. Any application that the township gets, we are going step by step through the ordinance. Permitted land uses within the zoning ordinance are subject to site plan review, and they do not have a public notice requirement. And so that follows the State Zoning Enabling Act process for reviewing site plans.
Hold on, please. Hey, please, let's order. I'd like to make sure that we're getting the answers to the questions. I'd like to make sure that every one of you residents get the answers to this question. So I would ask for decorum. Can you speak up just a little bit?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Continue, please.
So again, public notice is not required for any of our site plan reviews. So we follow the same process for any permitted land use. It goes, we go through the application process. We make sure that all of the application requirements are submitted with an application. It goes through consultant reviews, myself, engineering, fire, if necessary.
Let's switch that one out if we can. Do you mind? There we go.
Thank you. You're welcome. Oh. Can you hear me? Good. Okay. Let me step back. So our consultants, the township's consultants, will review every project. When we have issued our review letters and have determined that the standards and the information have been submitted in adequate form, we will send that to a planning commission agenda. So once it hits the planning commission agenda, the township has published all of their information. Typically we do that about a week in advance of a planning commission meeting. And so all of that information is on the Documents on Demand website that the township hosts and is available heading into a meeting.
I have to apologize because I blamed you for the microphone and it was actually mine. So I know, shame on me. Apologies. Might have jumped the gun there. All right. So thank you for that explanation. Is that standard practice? I don't know if that's a question that can be answered here. I mean, is this something that's like township wide? Is this something that's like, Michigan code or anything like that? That's pretty standard, or is that?
It is. Yes, it's standard in most communities in Michigan. There are processes and procedures that are outlined in the Zoning Enabling Act at the state level, but the township's site plan review requirements largely mimic the state act.
Okay. Thank you for that, Brian. I'm going to ask this question. This was something that I could clearly hear that there was some, we'll say, resistance to. The question is about noise. Was there a noise study completed for this project?
So there was a study completed by the applicants that was submitted. If we step back, the Planning Commission during their conditional approval added a condition that said we want the sound study submitted. And so an initial study has been submitted. We have pushed back on the contents of that. It's pretty basic. And so we expect that an update and potentially several iterations of that sound study get submitted and reviewed. So the township is in the process of hiring an independent sound engineer who will review the study, identify shortfalls, identify missing information or potentially inconsistencies in equipment or things like that that are shown on a site plan that they want clarification on. And their review then will go through not only the sound standards, are they able to meet the township ordinances, but that addresses things like in some of the public comments that we had heard at the township board and the planning commission was, is it going to cause vibrations in the ground, things like that. The sound engineer will review and comment and direct updates to that sound study.
So if I'm to understand correctly, it was conducted and it was found lacking by the township.
Yes,
and there's continuation of evaluation. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
Hold on, please. How does the township plan to ensure accuracy regarding this? This is obviously a very important issue.
Yeah, so we, in our discussions with potential sound engineers that will represent the township, we're vetting their credentials, we're vetting their industry standard professional accreditations, things like that, to make sure that they can look out for all of the things that we need to look out for.
Thank you for that. There is a big question that I have here, and I think this is the important one, and I might leave you alone for a little bit, but I reserve the right to come back. This is, there was clearly some disagreement with maybe some of the information that Jeff prepared from the audience. And I think that this is really important because it's obviously not one or the other, township versus Veris or Veris versus the township. But if Veris was found to be violating ordinances or anything else, what steps are taken by the township to ensure compliance? And this is not an accusation, Jeff. Please understand this is just for informational purposes. How will you hold them accountable?
So the way that we handle accountability on a development project varies a little bit based on the steps of the procedure that they're under, right? So if they are going through construction and things are installed on the site before they occupy the project that are not on the site plan, those are all things that will end up stopping construction. There won't be any CFOs, certificates of occupancy issued. They will not be allowed to start utilizing that as long as they are not in compliance with the site plan. So that includes all of the things like the mechanical equipment that'll be in the sound study. All those things get wrapped into that review, and those are the things that we'll be inspecting on site either through construction and prior to occupancy and use of the building. If there are violations of any of the ordinance standards once the project gets started, there's a variety of mechanisms to change that behavior, change that operation, revert back to the approved plan. So that can range from ticketing from the zoning enforcement authorities. It can be as severe as turning off water and sewer service so they legitimately cannot operate. So
there are mechanisms in place.
There are mechanisms, yes.
Okay. Thank you for that, Brian. I'm going to move on because I know that water is one of the main issues, or one of the issues that I have heard from a number of others. I'm going to go to Leslie, the township engineer. So if you were to look at a project of this side, this was a question in multiple formats. I got this one in so many different ways. Like, what would the expected water consumption be for a project of this size? What would you expect?
Thank you. So when I am designing water main or sanitary sewers for the township, for industrial and commercial zoning, we use 3 houses per acre. and each house is applied a value of 280 gallons per day. So for the simple calculation for this site, it's approximately 173 acres. You multiply that by 3 for the 3 homes per acre, and then multiply that by 280 gallons a day. So we would design the infrastructure for 145,320 gallons per day total for the whole acreage. And that equates to 53 million gallons per year. And that's what we would design the infrastructure either in the master plan or when we start the actual physical design.
So Leslie, if I'm to be clear, any industry, not Verus, not anybody else, anybody that comes into that site would be held to a 53 million gallon restriction. They could not go above that amount.
That is correct.
And if I recall correctly, Jeff, I'm coming back to you. 9 million was the number that I believe you cited. It was 9 million gallons, and that's across the different buildings?
Yeah, 9 million gallons once the campus is fully built out, about 1.5 million gallons per building.
Okay. All right, let me continue on this. Here's the big question. And I actually, it was really interesting when I read this one, because I am on a private well. In Battle Creek, I'm on a private well. And when I saw this, I was like, sorry, excuse me. But I was like, will the proposed Project Flex impact surrounding wells, aquifers, or anything else of that nature?
Okay. Well, I am also on a private well, so I completely understand and respect the concerns that the residents have expressed. The Lyon Township system is a groundwater system. So it's a public water main system. There is a township well located actually very near the site, and so very near many of your homes. And the township's wells, they range from 230 feet deep to 250 feet deep. They're in an aquifer that is 2 aquifers lower than the household wells. So the average household well depth within a 1-mile radius of the site is 85 feet deep. There are certainly some wells that are deeper than that, and there are some that are shallower, and I have reviewed the well information myself. So the township's South Hill well, which we also call New Hudson well, we use those interchangeably, it's permitted from the state of Michigan to be able to pump 4 million gallons per day into the system. So essentially, and one other key fact is Project Flex, this project, will connect to the township system. They will not be installing their own wells. So they will essentially be pulling from the deeper aquifer from the township's well. And just to give some examples on some recent flow information, this past summer, one of the highest flow days out of South Hill only was 2.7 million gallons a day. If we were in the same aquifer as your residential wells, they would have been impacted a very long time ago. So no, there will not be impact to the household wells that are near the facility or near the site.
So let me, and Leslie, I'm gonna ask this because I speak for a living and I do not understand aquifers, the depths, or anything else like that. Can you help me understand, what does it matter if it is 250 foot deep? I know that my well has got to be somewhere around like 60 or 70. What is the difference? Because I mean, if you're draining from the bottom, engineer this for me because I honestly don't know.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't explain that. So in between each aquifer, you have layers of sections of clay. And the clay prevents the aquifers from mingling with each other, essentially. So you have several different pools of water at different elevations separated by clay layers. And so that's what I mean by 2 aquifers lower than the household. There's 2 significant clay layers between where your wells draw from compared to where the township's wells draw from.
Thank you for that. And I should have paid better attention in geology or whatever. So I'm sorry, sir. I'm going to make sure that we get to all of the questions. There are more questions on water, Leslie. Okay. I do have one other question, and I think this is a fair question directly from the residents. How do you expect residents to limit water use in high peak summer months, yet allow a data center to use higher amounts of water?
Okay. I'm happy to explain this. So the prohibition on water use in summer months is not at your kitchen sink or your bathroom. It's only on irrigation. And the prohibition in the ordinance is you're not allowed to irrigate between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. Those are the peak hours of usage in your water system. All of you are getting ready for work, for school, you're showering, making breakfast, etc. You come home from work, you're making dinner, doing laundry, running the dishwasher, etc., right? So those are the peak times. The issue comes, it's not the amount of water the township has available in the aquifer. There's plenty of water in the aquifer. But when you have these peak hours with significant irrigation, what happens is it requires your pipes to get larger, all of your infrastructure has to get bigger, your pumps, and really the reason we do it, or the prohibition why I recommended it to the board several years ago, is to spread out those peaks so that the customers of the system, for those of you who are connected to the system, that it actually controls your rates. Because as the infrastructure gets larger, it's much more costly to build. And it would basically, the customers would pay for that infrastructure. So the prohibition on irrigation is simply to spread that out so everybody isn't using all of this water at the same exact time. But there's plenty of water available, it's the irrigation. It's the 5 to 9s that are the peaks, and that's the reason for it.
So if I'm to understand, this is a mitigation factor, so that way you don't have to raise taxes or something of that nature to redo infrastructure. Is that accurate, or would they be?
Yes, essentially. It's not a tax, but water customers pay into the Water Enterprise Fund, and if it's necessary to build additional mains or pipes because of irrigation, that's where it would come from. And so it really is to try to control costs. It's try to not to prohibit you from irrigating at all. It's just during certain time periods of the day.
Okay. Leslie, I'm gonna reserve the right to come back at this moment. There are a lot of questions related to water. I think that we covered a good majority of the top level ones that are coming in, but we're not going to get through everything. We already said this. I'm doing my best to make sure that we're getting to these big ticket items. You've cheered a couple of times. Bear with me. I'm doing the best we can with the time that we've been allotted. So what I would ask is to answer those questions very directly on the site if we don't make it back to you before this forum concludes, because it is important. And I do thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
I'm going to make this one moderately quick because I think it can be. And then after that, we're going to head over to Veris and dig in on a couple of things that we had heard here tonight. But this is actually for you, Deb, Township Attorney. I want a straight answer. Has Veris applied to the township for a tax abatement?
No, they have not.
Okay.
Nor can they.
This was something that was brought up across, and I'm going to get back to nor can they. This was something that was brought up in the Slido that, tax incentives, from my reading, from my understanding, my research, the state of Michigan has created some kind of an incentive structure for these types of facilities, and that has nothing to do with your local incentives. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay, so why could they not? You went there, and I want to make sure that I give you space to answer that.
Right. Thank you, Jay.
Yes.
No, they can't apply in Lyon Township because, a little bit of history, in 2022, the Lyon Township Board decided there won't be any more tax abatements in Lyon Township. And they passed a resolution that said no more tax abatements. And after they did that, then they proceeded to eliminate the industrial development districts that are required to be in place by the state of Michigan before anybody can apply for tax abatement. So, until, and in fact, with respect to this particular site, it was one of the first ones to be eliminated. The district was eliminated. So nobody can file an application until, number one, the board changes its mind about tax abatements in general, and then number two, there's a state-controlled process to establish an industrial development district before anyone can even apply to get a tax abatement. And then ultimately, if that all gets into place, even if the town, it's a process that's regulated by state law, and ultimately the State Tax Commission decides, yes, you can give a tax abatement, or no, you can't. But it starts at the local level, and it's Lyon Township's policy to not only not give tax abatements, but they've systematically been eliminating all the industrial development districts where either there was vacant land, there was nothing on them, or previous abatements had expired. Those have been eliminated too.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
The other thing that had been brought up, and this was mentioned by Jeff, and I want confirmation because this was a question that has come through as well. Has any township officials signed a non-disclosure agreement for this project?
That's an absolutely no.
Okay.
Answer.
Is that a standard township
Well,
because this obviously, when we're in sensitive situations like this, one of the things we see is like trust, right? We want transparency, we want trust, we want honest information, right? I mean, right? Okay. Yep, I hear you. So I just want to understand, what is it the standard practice for that? What does that look like? Help us understand what it would mean, or why, because it would make sense that somebody might want one of these. So can you give us just a little background on that?
well, I am familiar with communities being asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, and typically that's because whatever proposed development, they don't want it getting out, whatever. So that's not uncommon, but it is uncommon here. I've been representing them now for over 4 years, and I've never heard of them even being asked to sign an NDA, and certainly they've never approved one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to go to Varus, and we're going to start some questions that are related to some of the things that were talked about tonight, in addition to some of the things that are coming through here. So I think this is very important. I do appreciate the presentation. I think it was telling, but we're going to dig in a little deeper here. Maria, Jeff, and whoever is supposed to answer these questions. But number one is, this was a question that actually came up a lot, and it had me curious too. Why is it called Project Flex? That was a question. I'm listening to you. So that was asked and answered. The reason that it wasn't noticed was talked about from the site committee, respect, I'm sorry? That was answered by Brian. Stop, listen. I am listening, and I'm listening to the Slido. That question was answered by Brian in relation to, it went through site committee, and it went through planning. It didn't require, stop, listen, I understand that this is, what the hell am I hiding? I understand what she's saying. It didn't go to the board because it met the checklist items of that planning commission and site committee. That's what Brian had said. Thank you for this. Let me continue forward. Can you please explain what Project Flex, where that comes from? Because I am answering, please stop. I am answering the questions that are coming through on Slido, the questions that have been submitted to the township. I understand what it is, but I am being respectful to what is coming through here. I will get to this. Please again. This is all about information. I am doing my best to make sure that you're getting the information that is being requested from multiple different sources. I respect the question, okay? So if I could, go ahead and answer this.
In the most simple terms I can describe, that it's a flexible energy use data center that we're going to be providing demand flexibility back to the utility. Early on, we heard DTE mention that they had named it in their internal discussions Project Flex. That seemed like a neat name to us. It wasn't particularly thought through, other than it seemed like a neat name, and so we adopted it.
All right, thank you, please. So I'm gonna follow up on this. DTE, is this a standard practice? Dan, sorry, not DTE. You're not like DTE.
No, that's
Dan.
whatever. I am DTE tonight, right? Look, I mean, I appreciate the curiosity and the concern that the moniker creates for folks, but it's just a project name we used internally. DTE names every circuit, every substation, every power plant, every solar array, everything gets a name. And so this was just the name we prescribed to the project as we began to dig in and learn the details and study its application to our system. And as Jeff said, it's exactly right. It's a unique project that has unique dynamics. And flexibility is the primary dynamic of this project. So the name just sort of fit the project for us.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I think this is going to come to you, Amanda. I think this is a really important one because this one has come up on multiple different streams. What are Walled Bridge's plans for the remaining acreage that's not used for the data center, considering several industrial sites are available in the business parks and could add additional data centers?
So there are several sites still available. I think there's 3 to 5 in the South Hill Business Park and then 2 in South Hill Business Park West. While all of them are marketed, none of them are under contract or have plans for any specific development. And on South Hill Business Park, those sites are too small for most of these purposes. But again, we don't have any plans. We don't have proposals for plans. And we're just continuing to market them as we have with the entire site for a number of years.
At this point in time, and I'm going to ask, is there consideration, I know that you said that there's not in this moment, is there consideration that that could be a future use? And one of the questions here related to that is, after this kind of reaction, is that something that you're considering for future?
Again, we don't have any specific plans. The property is marketed. We would only consider projects that we feel are within the established use of the project. We had a number of conversations with DRP, but right now we don't have any agreements or any plans for the rest of the acreage.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Amanda. I'm coming back here, and this is going to relate to some of the different aspects that had come up related to noise and other aspects of these data centers. So I'm coming back to, and forgive me for not saying Maria and Jeff every time, I'm just going to say Varys. With that being said, one of the questions here is, were the health and wellness impacts of the construction hum of data centers considered? And honestly, can you please explain that? Because I don't know what that means, and I'm assuming that there's at least one other person out there that may not either.
Our goal is to study all of the sound that might emit from the data center, and we want to work with the township to get the sound study done that covers everything that is raised, and make sure that it is both compliant with the requirements of the zoning, but moreover, our goal is to build the quietest data center we can, and that's really where we've been driving this technology to do that. And so that's the goal of a sound study, is to assess the impact and the potential sound that might emit from the data center, and we're going to keep working with the township to support whatever studies that they expect for the site plan.
Now, there seem to be a number of studies that are related to health and wellness. Is the construction, because I understood the construction of the data center that is here is more modern, is different, it's not using generators from my understanding. Can you confirm again, will there be generators on the site for this project?
I'll state it again. I think I said it earlier, but it's worth diving into. We don't have permits for generators. We are designing from the ground up with a new modern data center design that relies on batteries for backup. We can't install generators without permits. I'm not sure how else to clearly say it. To get permits would require a local and state authorization. We don't have that. the plan remains to use batteries for backup.
Okay, so you said it requires local and state permitting. It
Yes.
seems reasonable to assume that if there's an opportunity and the state has said, hey, we're going to incentivize these data centers, that wouldn't be a big issue. But what would that look like? And maybe I could ask this over to Brian. What would that look like at the local level? I think this is important to ask.
Our expectation at this point, because of what was portrayed at the Planning Commission meeting about the presence of generators or the lack of presence of generators on the site, when the final site plan comes in for us for review, we will be ensuring that there are no generators on that site plan. If the operator, Veris, were to request an addition or a change in the plan to add generators, that would come back before the township for a site plan amendment. And ultimately, they would be responsible for whatever standards are in place in the zoning ordinance at that time to either allow or disallow those generators.
Okay. If Veris, and I'm coming back to Veris on this, if Veris were to secure a future client that required installation of backup generators, how would you go about getting approval?
Our goal is to build data centers that are relying on batteries for backup. We're not bringing customers in and telling them you should install diesel generators. That's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to build. But regardless of that, regardless of the fact that our entire mission is focused around this different thing, I'm going to answer the question because it was asked directly and we should give a direct answer. We'd have to get permits. We'd have to get approvals from the local township. We'd have to get air permits from the state, from the air permitting authorities. But again,
Please, hold on.
But again, we don't have permits for generators. We're going to make sure that our final site plan reflects the fact that we're going to use batteries as our backup, and that's our plan. And we apologize for any confusion any documents may have caused by that.
Okay.
But again, we are trying to build the most modern, the cleanest, the quietest, the most sustainable data centers.
So we're going to get to the batteries in just a few moments here, but I kind of want to stick with the relationship between generators, the noise, and additionally the electricity use. Because we had a short amount of time for some of the presentation of this information. How much electricity will this data center require?
So the design expects for roughly 200 megawatts to start based on the existing infrastructure that's already adjacent to the site at the peak. But again, our design is to be flexible to relieve the grid of stress whenever required to help maintain reliability. And the site can handle a full campus that could go up to about 400 to 500 megawatts over time at peak. But all of that would be capable of flexing down whenever the grid is stressed for reliability.
Okay. Follow up to you, Dan. The grid capabilities, what impact, and kind of straight shot, like what impact does this have on the grid supporting this load? How does this function? If you've had other data centers and this one's maybe different, I don't know how that works, but can you explain what is the grid capacity? Is it capable of handling this?
Sure, happy to do so. As I covered the basket of customer protections earlier, one of the ones I cited was resource planning, right? So there's no scenario where DTE can provide service to any data center in our electric service territory and have that cause reliability challenges for our customers. Later this year, we'll file the integrated resource plan that I mentioned with the Public Service Commission. That is the process we go through to have them review and approve any potential new generation we would build. It looks at our load, forecast for the next 5 years fixed, plus a longer-term vision, 10 to 15 years of what load and demand would look like on the system. That's the process that would, again, review and approve new load and how we would serve that new load with new power assets. And so, what else are you looking for in terms of an answer here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is at what risk does this put the residents of the township?
Yeah, sure. Let me just start where I began previously. Like, the regulations that govern our business protect our customers from there ever being a scenario where our generation fleet is overextended.
And these are the state regulations, federal, where do those regulations come from?
State, regional, and federal, right? So there's a variety, there's a layering of utility regulations. The Michigan Public Service Commission regulates reliability here in the state. Jeff's previous organization, a group called MISO, the Mid-Intercontinental System Operator, who manages the regional grid that stretches generically from Louisiana to Manitoba, right? They help the individual small regional grids connect and share power resources, right? They would review and approve new assets being connected to the grid, right? And then there is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that does have oversight as well over the energy markets, right? So there's a variety of layers that provide these protections for our customers. We're in the process of studying this specific project and other data centers in our service territory. We do detailed engineering analyses with our partners at ITC who own the transmission system. We just couldn't enter into a contract that would overextend our generation fleet.
So, Dan, can I ask a backup, kind of a follow-up question? A lot of this information, you say you do the studies and everything else. Is that published somewhere? Is it made public? Is there any communication or anything that can be found that says, hey, this is what these things have done in the past or in the future? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, these aren't based on studies. These are based on government regulations, right?
Okay.
And so if you would like to learn more, or the residents here would like to learn more, go to the Michigan Public Service Commission website to learn about state energy regulations. That's probably a really good place to start. I mentioned earlier the website that DT rolled out. That's a secondary resource. So those are two good places to go to get information.
Okay, and this can either be, actually, let's stick with you, Dan. The new substations and the transmission upgrades that are being built. This was a question that came in on the township and through a couple of forums. It seems to me that it's been who is paying for them. It sounded to me like I understood from your presentation that that's on Verus. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
Okay, so the follow-up to that then, and the question that has come through, how do these substations function? What does that look like? Can you give us, and again, talk to me like I'm a child, because I really just don't understand this.
No.
Yep.
I'm going to hand it back to Jeff here in a minute, but essentially a substation functions as a safety aspect of the power grid, right? So a power plant will generate electricity. It will push that electricity over high voltage transmission lines. Everyone here knows what those look like. But to consume that power, it needs to be stepped down in its voltage. That's the role of a substation, is to help step down that power to a safe level for commercial, industrial, or residential uses, right? Now, this particular substation for this site, Jeff, I believe, is owned and operated and constructed by the data center developer itself, right? So it's not going to be something that DTE owns and operates. It would not be an asset in our rate base. It would be a piece of the project that Verus would build.
Is that pretty common, or is that a normal procedure?
It happens both ways, right? So yes, it is common, but it is not the standard.
Okay. And I ask because some of the questions that have come through are related to the safety, what does that look like, et cetera. I want to turn it to Verus, and you said you would pass that over. Jeff or Maria?
Yeah, confirming what Dan was saying, we're paying for building and will be operating the data center. It is much more common in the data center world generally than it is for other kinds of customers. was there more to the question than that?
No, I think that covers. It was cost, reliability, and impact on the grid that is kind of the overall. I want to switch now. We're going to move into something that was said during the presentation that I definitely heard some reaction to, and we're going to talk about the backup power systems. If generators are not going to be used, and you had mentioned batteries, can you be very specific? What kind of batteries are we looking at? What does that technology look like? And specifically, how are they tested?
Yeah. The battery technology is the most modern technology for batteries that you're going to find. They're used broadly in the utility industry. It's the fastest growing new kind of resource that's being built on the power grid. DTE is building gigawatts of batteries at multiple sites around the southeast Michigan. Same kind of batteries we would be putting in at our site.
If I could.
They have a lithium basis to them. They're modern technology.
Stop. Thank you. Listen. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about risk here, right? Because this is obviously an issue. Thank you. Hold on. My question. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna give you a break on this for 1 second because I think it's important to ask this. Bruce, I'm gonna go to the fire department. This is something that was asked a lot. Help me understand. This goes through, and there's lithium-ion batteries or anything else like that. Has the department been trained on or successfully extinguished a lithium battery fire? Help me understand. Please, I am going to the questions that you are asking. Let's show respect and dignity. We are seeking answers. Sir, I'm going to ask you to please refrain. If you do not refrain, I will ask you to be escorted out. I'm being kind here. Zero tolerance. It's a choice. You have a choice. Please refrain. Allow me to get the answers to this question. Bruce, could you please answer?
Yeah, the fire department has trained on lithium battery fires, including thermal runaway scenarios, and using simulated exercises to practice cooling containment, toxic gas management, and hazard zone safety. And to answer the second part of that question, last year it wasn't a hyperscale data center, but nonetheless it was a commercial fire involving lithium batteries that we successfully contained, extinguished, and minimized damage at a facility in the township.
Are you able to say, stop, please, allow me, please? I'm getting to these questions that you're asking. If we keep interrupting, it is going to stop us from getting to all of your questions, okay? So, Sir, I'm going to ask you to refrain. I hear you, I understand. And like I said, there's a lot of questions here. There was 400 plus questions that were put on the township website. The best that we can do is get you as much answers as we can with the time that we're allotted. The commitment, I understand. The commitment, then I would ask you to please refrain because I'm not going to continue with the questions. Can we please have her removed? Listen, I understand. Hey, listen. Gentlemen, listen. Hold on. I hear you. I empathize with you. I hear you and I empathize with you. It's not an insult. My job is to, all these residents have questions too. Okay? I have asked, I understand. There's a lot of people here. That are asking questions. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask ask you to please refrain, or we will conclude this. We'd like to get more questions. This was set as an expectation. I understand your perspective. This was set as an expectation at the very beginning. Thank you very much. Bruce, would you please continue with answering this question? Can you give us any specifics on this?
In regard to the fire itself?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't want to mention the particular company, but it was a larger facility, and there were multiple battery packs that were on fire, and we were able to extinguish it and remove it from the facility, again, with minimizing the overall damage to it.
Okay. So can you help me understand, you had mentioned that there was training and everything else like that. Is there any additional, because this is obviously a very, very important issue. So I'd like to understand, can you help me understand any of the training or any of those types of aspects? I'd heard fume mitigation, I'd heard something else. Can you please just make sure that that's very, very clear?
Yeah, so as far, I'll go into, are we equipped to extinguish battery fires in general? And that I might be able to answer that for you. So yes, the fire department is equipped and trained to respond to lithium battery fires. And
specifically lithium batteries?
Correct.
Thank you. Please let him answer the question. Please answer the question, Bruce.
But obviously these incidents are managed differently than traditional structure fires. Lithium battery fires can now always be extinguished by conventional means. Our response focuses on early detection, cooling, controlling fire spread, managing toxic gases, and preventing reignition. This may require large amounts of water, extended on-scene operations, continuous monitoring of the situation. Our personnel are trained in these tactics and are equipped with appropriate protective equipment and also the hazardous material protocols that are in place. That being said, the primary responsibility in managing a battery fire rests and lies with the facility's design and built-in safety systems, which are not solely on the emergency response itself. Modern data centers are required to comply with strict fire and building codes that mandate fire suppression systems, compartmentalization, ventilation, emergency shutdowns, and fire department access. These measures are intended to contain a battery event and limit its impact on the surrounding properties. Public safety is our priority, and any data center project must demonstrate that battery fire risks are properly addressed prior to that facility becoming operational.
Sir, hey, listen, sir, I'm going to ask you to leave as well. Please stop interrupting. Please stop interrupting. The questions were placed, there's 400 questions on the Township website. There's also, thank you very much. There are 400 questions. So, allow me to continue. Please allow me to continue. I want to respect the neighbors, please. There's a number of people here that I believe are getting good information. There's been several questions. There have been several questions that you have applauded because they are coming directly from you. I am working through these different questions to get answers. I know that each of you has individual questions in your mind. I'm trying to make sure that as much representation is happening. If your question is not specifically answered, I encourage you to use your voice, put it into the Slido, consider that, and send it through the email address. That's going to give you the best opportunity to get your answers. Those will be done. We've had less than an hour and 15 minutes. We are going through quite a lot of information tonight. So please, I will continue. Thank you. Yes. All right. So let me go back to Varys here. When we're looking at the battery components and that backup, what have you done, or what are some of those safety protocols? What are some of those different things that you would do in order to create the conditions for safety amongst, obviously, the residents?
The As the fire chief said, the battery containment systems are designed to meet the strictest standards. The batteries themselves are certified by the Underwriter Laboratories. They use the most modern controls technologies, as I was saying, the most modern containment. If we don't comply with all of those requirements for fire safety, we wouldn't be able to operate. And so we're striving to build the safest version of a data center that you can, and that is what we're doing.
Okay. So I'm going to ask a couple of other questions here as we get very close to our time. This is one that came up immediately following your comment, Dan. Will the data center's energy use be publicly reported?
Earlier, I mentioned the Public Service Commission ordered us to design a specific rate for data centers, and that specific rate had a number of conditions and contingencies baked into it. Reporting annually is one of those. This is a relatively new direction we received from the Commission, basically December 16th, 17th, 18th of last year. So there might still be some guidelines or rules being put in place. I don't want to misspeak, but the expectation on us is yes, reporting annually to the Public Service Commission on data center usage on our system.
Thank you, Dan. I do have a follow-up that's very related to that came through. What oversight exists if usage exceeds expectations?
Can you just repeat it? There was a comment from the...
What oversight exists if the usage that is coming out of this exceeds the expectations?
If the usage exceeds the expectations.
So there's an expected amount of usage of electricity. What if this data center excessively goes over that? Like, what are the restrictions? What oversight? How does that get handled?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. Sites, and possibly Jeff can also speak to this, sites for data centers are picked for a number of criteria. One in particular is the capacity of the local transmission lines. And so that's one of the things that we assist data center projects with, again, working with our partners at ITC to study and understand the capacity of the individual transmission lines. So, Jeff, again, I don't want to overstate it, but I believe that it would not be possible for a data center to consume more electricity than what the local transmission lines could supply them.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's move forward here, because I do want to at least cover this topic area. This was a big topic area that was communicated, everything from traffic to the visibility to the impact on, the visibility of the township and the residents and housing and everything else like that. In one of your slides, there was some data, but I'd like to spend a little bit of time here because there are a number of questions related to this. So I'm going to turn this to Varys. First of all, can you talk about what protections are going to be in place from a landscape design and everything else to keep this from being something that, and I can share this personally, I just had a whole bunch of solar farms show up next to me, and it was something that was kind of shocking, okay? I'd like to understand, as well as the audience, how are you protecting? I understand that maybe one of you or some of you don't, but there's plenty of questions on this. How are you going to protect residential value, whether landscaping or anything else?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, we understand the importance of landscaping and appearance in general. We did our best to depict that today in our presentation for what it would actually look like when constructed and from viewpoints on the road. As we mentioned, the main building is set back more than 140 feet from Milford Road, and we also have over 370 feet from the nearest boundary. We also did a couple extra things beyond that point, as you mentioned, where Jeff covered about the berming and the extra landscaping that we're doing on site. The site plan does exceed Township's minimum landscaping requirements, and it is very important to us that we will maintain a visibly clean and proper landscaping so that this site appears as low impact.
Okay. I'm going to kick over to Brian real quick. I'm coming back to you on Veris on some of this other aspect, but one of the things that I'm looking at here is related to lighting. There's concerns about how much lighting, how much that's going to affect. Is this going to be something that is going to create light pollution, et cetera? Is that something that's represented?
It is in the plan set that the Planning Commission reviewed, and we will expect an updated photometric plan when the final site plan set comes in. It does depict all of the lighting fixtures that are anticipated on the buildings and around the sites. There's a lighting level study called the photometric plan that is included in there, and it shows lighting levels well within limits at the property boundaries. All of the lighting fixtures that are on the site comply with the township standards for downward shielding, so the lights are not directed up into the sky. They're all located down where, in theory, employees would be traversing the site, things like that.
Okay. This one goes back to Veris. This was asked, is Veris a private or publicly held company?
Veris is a private company. We are relatively new, as I think most people have heard. We are standing up this business to do what I was describing earlier, which is to build a better kind of data center. Everybody who works at Veris has come from public companies that are building data centers that are not the same as what we're building, and we're trying to bring all of that expertise together to build something better. We're a private company because we're still young. I think in some future world, maybe we become a public company down the road once we're big enough.
So I'm going to move on. This question is for Leslie. I think it's Leslie, and if I'm inaccurate on that, then somebody, whoever it is, please pick this up. How is construction traffic going to be handled from the data center project?
All of the construction traffic, as well as traffic once it is built, will come from South Hill onto Ambassador Parkway West. There are 2 access points on the site plan for first responders only when the site is built, but there will not be any additional traffic onto Milford Road.
Okay. Veris, this is another one from the top here. Will the facilities be LEED certified? And if you would be so kind to share what LEED certified would mean.
Thank you. We will actually be, as we've listed on our website, we are pursuing potentially multiple green building initiatives. Currently, right now, we are working on the Green Globe process, which is a nationally recognized process across the states, especially within Michigan and Minnesota. That is something that we are pursuing on the site, and we will have to go through rigorous approval processes. What that means is you work with an independent third party. The Green Building Initiative is a company. We have to go through all plan submissions as well as design review. After the building is fully constructed, they come back and they literally go through a long, massive checklist of every little thing you said you were going to do with your design and make sure everything was adhered to. And then after all of that process is complete, then they do internal reviews. And then after all of that is done, then you get a certificate issued to you and approval. And we will be proceeding forward with a process like that as mentioned.
Thank you. This one's going to Brian and Leslie. And this is Q&A from the Township. Keeps referring to according to the applicant. Will the Township do its own due diligence on noise, light pollution, impact on consumer electric prices after the data center is built?
On the standards were light?
We can go one by one if that makes sense.
Yeah.
On the light, so the question was related to light, noise, and impact on consumer electric.
On light, the standards have already been achieved on the plans that have been submitted. We'll continue with each iteration as construction documents are prepared and things like that to ensure that all those standards are met. Noise, as we had talked about before, we will be hiring the independent sound engineer to review all of the iterations of the sound studies. As to electric rates, I'm going to have to defer to DTE. I can't answer that.
Okay, thank you. I think we did talk about that a little bit, Dan, so I'm gonna leave that there. Leslie, did you have something to add to that?
Well, regarding water.
Thank you.
So when we say referring to the applicant, we reviewed the information that has been provided to the applicant, and as you know, they have received a conditional site plan approval. There are a lot of conditions that they have to meet, and so just to give you an idea of the next, I'm going to elaborate a little bit if you don't mind. The next step, the applicant will provide to the township final site plans, and those site plans are supposed to meet all of the conditions. We review them as independent reviewers, myself, Brian, fire, a sound engineer, and if we need any other additional expertise, they will be brought in. The project doesn't move past that until all conditions are met. So do we review them? Absolutely. They will have to provide very detailed calculations on water. My team will review those. So we divide it up based on whose expertise. But when we say per the applicant, because this is what they've provided to us to date, but there are many steps in the process before this goes to construction.
So the due diligence is in that review process. It is conditional. Project does not move forward until those conditions are satisfactorily met by the township team or the sound engineer is what I'm understanding.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you for that. This question comes for Amanda from Walbridge. Who reached out to whom? And ultimately, it kind of goes to, is Walbridge intentionally marketing towards data centers? I know we mentioned that there's no plans in place, but is that something that you're intentionally marketing to, seeking out, et cetera?
No, we're not intentionally marketing to data centers. We have had general marketing up for a number of years. I'm sure everyone's seen the orange signs or yellow signs on the corner with our previous broker's information. Because of the zoning, we do tend to...
I'm sorry, can you pull the microphone just a little
Because
closer?
of the zoning, we do tend to end up with more industrial users, but this is in fact the first data center that we've had serious conversations with. And they were brought to us through DRP, who had vetted the project and knew of our property and thought it was a good fit.
Okay. Thank you. This question... about what? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to move on. This question, Brian, this is probably a you question. Because this is such a large facility, is the project planting, the landscape, what does the township require? If more is needed to buffer the space, how will you enforce essentially creating the conditions for the place not to be essentially a blighted site? Like, is there a way for you to? I'm trying to read from the question specifically. Mm-hmm. This is a large facility. How will the township ensure that it is protected from the different ways in which Jeff and Maria had suggested? Whether it's berms or anything else. What is your capability of enforcing those types of things for the residents?
So the township does have a variety of blight mitigation ordinances in place. If it were to get to that, if the use ended, the site would have to get cleaned up to an acceptable standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is going to be the final question that we're going to be able to cover tonight. Ferris. Quiet, please. Quiet, please. So the one question let's see where we got.
Who's going to run for the township board?
Thank you. Thank you, I do appreciate it. So The question is, in what way, or how much will Veris be contributing to township taxes? Like, what does that tax look like? Please, listen, your voice, I understand. Hey, actually, let's just go ahead and close this out. I would look to the board. I'm going to look to the board for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, they want to adjourn the meeting. He's asking you to adjourn the meeting.
It's 9:15, we're going to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you for coming.
It is 9:15.
Stand. Listen, you